Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the lecture summary for Sociology 240, Race and Ethnic Relations. Today's lecture, April 27th, on Critical White Studies. What I wanted to introduce here are the concepts of both multiculturalism and multiracialism. And these are things that, concepts that came out of the 1990s, and there was kind of a push in society towards multiculturalism. Which basically the general message of multiculturalism was that we are all one people. We are all Americans. We all speak the same language. We all have the same haircuts. We all wear the same T-shirts. If you look at a show like Barney, I don't know what you guys were raised on, but if you look at especially like kids shows are great at showing like a multiracial cast of kids: an Asian kid, a black kid, a white kid, a Native American kid, a short kid, a kid in a wheelchair, and stuff like that. In order to show America's diversity, what's included in multiculturalism is the idea that like we are all the same, we're all capable of the same stuff. One of the problems with multiculturalism is that it's picking one culture and it's sticking to that one heteronormative kind of, I don't know if I should say white supremacist culture, but it's, like typical American culture. And it kind of negates all the other cultures that come into that. Multiracialism, same thing. We're all the same. And so something that comes out of the 90s, which had very good intentions, was colorblindism. The idea that, like, in order to get past racism, we have to stop talking about it. If we stop talking about racism, it will go away on its own. If we raise our kids to be colorblind, racism will go away on its own. So it was out of the 90s that people started to say, like, I don't see color, I only see people. That's nice. That's great. That would be fantastic. A fantastic goal for us to have in society. It's great, but it's incredibly unrealistic right now. The truth is, children are not colorblind. Children see color immediately. They pick up on these things in the same way that they pick up on hair color and eye color and height and weight and stuff like that. They're not blind. Children are not blind. We don't teach them to see race. They see it. My point would be like, that's okay. It's okay for them to see race. They don't necessarily have to learn the hard categories. And they definitely don't need to learn how to rank order when it comes to that. So, I don't know if I explained this in class once, but I remember like one time I was driving with my kids, and my 7-year-old daughter was talking about these two kids in her class. They were both named Brandon. And so she was talking about Brandon. Brandon said this today. And my son was like, which Brandon? And she was like, Brandon K. And he's like, I don't know who that is. And she was like, Brown Brandon. And so my son was like, oh, okay, yeah, Brown Brandon. And as I'm driving, I'm like, oh no, they're focused on race. What have I done? I've failed as a parent. And immediately after that, she was like, Brown Brandon, not Peach Brandon, but Brown. So they were focused on crayon colors. And then they also started making references to hair color. And I'm like, I'm not freaking out over hair color. Should I be freaking out over skin color? Who cares? Featured in this lecture is the idea of us, the year 2050. This is for the next 3 lectures. I'm going to be talking about the year 2050, 30 years from now, and what America will look like. And it's predicted that the majority of Americans in the United States will be multiracial by then. And it creates this question: will all of us being multiracial, being of multiple races, will that end racism in the United States? Some say yes, because how could you be racist if everybody's mixed? Although I'm suspicious of human beings and our tribal inclinations, and I think we might just create new categories. I think we might create new categories to be racist against. Overall in this lecture, there's the idea about what multiracialism is going to look like. What is the purpose of it? I start talking about different modalities for how we look at each other. cultural pluralism where each culture kind of has its own space. Multiculturalism, where we all strive to be a part of the same culture. Which, again, if we all strive to be part of the same culture, that means that everybody's going to lose a little bit of something. Are we willing to lose that? Because that loss is the same thing that happens when it comes to assimilation. When we assimilate into a culture, you're dropping and you're losing older parts of your culture. That might not be a bad thing. Might not be a good thing either. Here's my prediction. I taught you guys a lecture on social Darwinism, and I'm deathly afraid that we're going to repeat social Darwinism. And while doing this lecture on multiracialism, the idea of like most people will be mixed race by 2050, it made me start to think about maybe there'll be a different form of social Darwinism in 2050, where we start to rank order those that have the most races in their DNA and those that are of the pure races, or like a single race. You might literally have someone be like, ew, you're just white, you're gonna die. Ew, you're just black, you're gonna die soon. And that's kind of based on the premise that this is a real scientific premise, that the more diverse your DNA is, the more diverse your genetics are, the greater capacity you could have, not always should, but like the greater capacity you could have for fighting off disease and viruses. So, it's time of viruses right now, huh? Although I will say, race has nothing to do with coronavirus. It's impacting us all the same. But what's going to be interesting is that a generation from now, there will be a whole bunch of people who will have built up some immunity to the coronavirus. This is not going to be you guys. This is going to be your kids. They will build up an immunity to coronavirus and will have the antibodies to where coronavirus will not affect them. And then there will be people on this planet who never had any exposure to coronavirus, and they will get wiped out in that next generation. They're going to be the ones getting sick. And there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are like, why are these people getting sick? So that is an advantage to genetic diversity, where the more of those things that you're exposed to, the more immunities that you have in your DNA. And I'm kind of predicting that there's going to be this really bad racism. Listen, I'm mixed race. I'm biracial. And I'm like, my people, biracial people, multiracial in the future might be the most hoity-toity racist people in the future. Who knows? Because they might look at those that are just of a single race and say like, oh my God, you're genetically inferior to me. I have everything. I can adapt to the summer. I can adapt to the winter. I can adapt to running. I can be an athlete. I can be smart. I can be that. I can be all the above. And you're just white. Or you're just black. You're just Asian. So like that, listen, this is a prediction. I hope I'm wrong. I genuinely hope I'm wrong. So, second thing I want to mention today is the final paper. The directions are up under assignments right now. And that paper is due on May 11th. But I just want to speak to it a little bit now. What I'm asking you to do in this paper, typed in double spaced, yes, still due on May 11th. It has 3 parts. And the whole purpose of this is to talk about the impact of race on your ancestors. So for one, since everybody's in close proximity to your family, for this first part of this paper, I kind of want you to interview a member of your family to talk about, in terms of immigration, why? Why did they come to the United States? Why did your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents, why? Why did they choose to come here and leave their place of birth? What opportunities were they seeking? What is the story of immigration in your family? I want everybody to tell their story of immigration in their family. Secondly, I want you to talk about what was the impact that this had. So I'm just going to read from the second section. I'm saying, second section of this paper, conduct research on this particular ethnicity, in which decade was there the largest immigration pattern. So think about your ethnicity and then do research on that particular ethnicity. So if you're going to focus on Italians, focus on Italian immigration. If you're focusing on Haitians, focus on Haitian immigrations. How were they treated generally upon arrival to the United States? Which racial group were they forced to be a part of? Was there any laws that prevented them from coming or encouraged them to come? Some sort of asylum laws or disaster laws? I want everybody to focus on two very important pieces of legislation: the Johnson-Reed Act of 1924 and the Immigration Reform Act of 1965. How did those two things impact your ancestors, even if they weren't here? But like, in other words, like the Johnson-Reed Act would have prevented most students at Queensborough Community College from coming to the United States because they would have been very limited to come here in favor of German and English and Scandinavian immigration in 1924. The last section of this paper, really there's 4 sections because I want a bibliography and I want citation throughout. The last section of this paper is talking about the advantages and disadvantages of this particular group. You know, like where did they fit in the hierarchy, in the racial hierarchy of the United States? Like, so a great example of that is like, you know, a lot of West Indians come to the United States and people ask them, what are you? And someone will be like, oh, I'm Jamaican. And Americans will be like, nuh-uh, you're black. And like suddenly a Jamaican who's always identified as Jamaican, that's a part of their identity. Suddenly they just got thrusted into this racial group. So I want you to discuss that a little bit there. And I basically just want you to talk about how these laws impacted and how these policies impacted your family. So please go and take a look at the directions on their assignments. This week, obviously, you know, I expect you guys to start doing this work on April 27th. And we have 2 more lectures after this, and then a final exam, which I believe is going to be May 18th. I'm going to make that available on May 18th. Your final paper is due on May 11th. Let's finish out this semester, okay? All right, guys. I'll see you next week. Take care.